Start a few seconds late, but please understand we've been going at it since 8 o'clock. So good things going on in the district. All right, we'll start with Mr. Superintendent. Do you have any comments? Since there's lots of paper flying around, so go ahead, sir, whatever you'd like to start with.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do have comments. I'm going to ask Mr. St. Cyr to come and present. He's going to talk a little bit about FT from the prior year, some CARES Act updates, and some budget information.
We'll give him a couple of seconds. Only remember, he was also part of the last meeting that, so he can get everything straight. We will be finishing up one item from yesterday. So just to let you know that if you're anticipating being early on the meeting, just relax and enjoy yourself. Go get a Coke, do something. Mr. St. Cyr, thank you.
Thank you, sir. We're Ms. Harris, so we always put her to work as best we can, and I think she's got it together. I'm going to give you a little update on the FTE situation, actual, and a little comparison to the prior year. Then we're going to get into, I think next I'll just give you some CARES Act information, kind of an outlook on what's coming. And then we'll recap what we talked about briefly, which is the House and the Senate proposals on the FEFP.
Plenty of time, go ahead. So only, how many sheets are there?
Nope, I think it's all.
Okay.
3 things here. Yeah, these are all right.
Okay,
Which sheet you have?
the first one we'll go to is the, it's got a list of all the schools. It's the FTE. It's the long, should be 2 pages, I believe, on that one.
Yeah.
Okay, this is, I wanted to go ahead and update us on our FTE. Of course, we're working off of second calculation for our budgeting purposes for our funding. Current year, we never did adjust the revenue, the state never did adjust the revenue back to the actual, what really occurred in October and February. So we're still riding the projections that were based on second calculation, first and second calculation of the FEFP. So I just want to give you a scenario, the rundown of the current scenario, actual and then estimated finishing out 2021. I'm going to go through this pretty quick, and I've got some highlighted numbers on this first page. And it splits it, you know, when we get all this data, it splits it by every school, every that has a cost center. So getting into the elementary schools, first column is in terms of the numbers, 2020 actual. Then we'll go into 2021 estimated. The estimated portion of 2021, which is the current fiscal year, is the fourth FEFP, fourth survey, June survey. That's the estimated part. We've got actual 1, 2, and 3, but just finishing it out, I just called it estimated for 2021. And you'll look at the what actually happened last fiscal year compared to what's happening in the current year. Everything in the elementary, middle, and high schools is what's basically going to hold, because the only thing that changes for the fourth would be virtual and DJJ. All right, so looking at elementary schools, you'll see 2020 against 2021, there was a negative 1,168 unweighted FTE from prior year to current year. That's how many students were not counted compared to 2020. Okay? Middle schools, the same scenario. Middle schools are down from prior year 327.91. High schools were down 186. And then so for a total for our regular schools compared to prior year, we're down 1,683 unweighted FTE in our regular traditional schools. Okay, moving on into the other programs and the charter schools and the virtual. You pick up a little bit more when you go to virtual because of the students who opted into virtual, ESCAMBIA virtual. So when you look at the grand total, prior year 39,643 against current year 38,494. So it looks pretty close to about 1,150 unweighted FTE that are missing from the prior year. Okay. Now the projections, we projected for the current year 39,828. 39,828. So the change from projections was right at 1,300 unweighted. And we've talked about this through the years, especially as we got Survey 2 and then moving into Survey 3, we knew we were down significantly. Okay? So the funding on that 13, so we're based on projections is where we're funded at currently. We're down 1,300 off of that, so that would be a significant revenue change if they had made that calculation. It would be between, it depends on how the categoricals move, but we're getting up $8 or $9 million. That's how much revenue would have been lost in the current year based on the student population. Okay, next page on that, same topic. Right behind that, you'll see Revenue Estimating Conference has projected out years until 2026. 1920, we just talked about that, 39,643. Then we're finishing out 2021 about 38,494. And then you'll see the years that are, and our current projections for 2022, this is our projections to DOE, was 38,674. And then the State Estimating Conference projected out to 2026. So it peaks up there a little bit about 2024 and then starts coming back down. Okay. All right, let's go to the CARES Act. Teresa, Ms. McCants gave you some information. I think it was the last time we talked some about this. And this is an update on what we've got. It's split up into so much stuff. The first row, ESSER, we now call it ESSER 1 because we have ESSER 2 right on its heels. We'll have ESSER 3 somewhere down the road. The ESSER 3 is part of that 1.9 trillion that was just spent. We haven't seen that one yet. ESSER 2 was the one that happened right before the beginning of the calendar year. We're just now sending an application in for ESSER 2, and I'll get into that in just a second. Okay, so you'll look at the first column. This is the allocations. The GEAR portion, GEER, that's the Governor's Emergency Relief. He kind of carved that up based on some projected needs and different things like that. Summer school, sanitation and cleaning, even though that was all part of the ESSER, the big one. And some other things like that. And then, so I'll just go down the list quick and check off a couple of them. The big ESSER 1, $12.3 million. That's good until 9/2022. So that one ends in September 2022. To date, we've spent $4.3 million. And we've got plans to spend this. We just haven't spent it fast. Now, we'll spend more in the current year. We'll get more salaries out there on it that are eligible. Next year, we'll do the same thing, and then there'll be a lot of other issues, too, that we'll deal with next year on this ESSER 1. You see the gears I just talked about. That's split up into various things. CARES Act, GS, where you see GS, that's George Stone. George Stone is part of the higher education portion of the CARES Act. It kind of, those two came directly from the federal government, did not flow through the state. And the George Stone portion, the major portion of that was helping students with their tuition costs. So they rebated some students some tuition costs based on those. And then I think there's a few other things that are going on with that. And so on. So there's just a variety of things. We have about $16.6 million allocated. We spent about just under $6 million to date. And that looks like we haven't spent a lot, but remember, most of these are out for 2 years. So we're on track. Okay? All right, next page. This is just a little more detail on a few of those. ESSER 1, the Emergency and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. This was the first one that came down last summer. $12.3 million through September 22. And then just a bullet on what those are to be used for. And I've got a bigger detail on the next page. Then the Governor's Fund totaled about 1.9, just under 2 million. All of that finishes up. Some of it's already done. Some of the other stuff finishes up in September 22. And those are some of the uses of that. Then, like I said, the higher education, which this went to the colleges and universities, I think. George Stone was part of that. And those totals finish, it looks like that finishes up in January 2022, all that. All right, the next page is more detailed of ESSER 1. Grant award, amount spended, 4.3, and then this is just kind of a very broad allowable uses that we're utilizing. There's more of that's really in the detail of the budget. Some of the things that we're doing with it started out, and I think Sean would agree with this. We started out heavy with the sanitation, cleaning, and all those supplies like that. And I think that's kind of personal protective equipment. That's kind of shifted. It's still going on, but I think that's kind of shifted from that. Now we're using it more for the academic. We bought a lot of remote infrastructure, I guess you could say, a lot of hardware, software for remote learning. Things like that, utilizing staff in various ways, training, different things like that. So and nursing units. We added nursing units based on some of this extra pay, teacher training. There's just a variety of things going on with that. ESSER 2, we just sent in an application for ESSER 2. Just look at the amount of that award, $48 million. ESSER 1 we're trying to spend, that's $12 million. Now we've got to spend $48 million on ESSER 2, but guess what this one gets into? Infrastructure. We'll start getting into air quality. Mr. Dennis, we've discussed this. He's discussed this with his staff, and they've got some plans for air quality. At some point, I think we'll come up with how we're going to spend all this at another one of these kind of sessions, and we can get into some more detail. But I'm just giving you an overview now. So a lot of the focus on ESSER 2 will be salaries and some infrastructure going on with the highest need first, all the way through what we can do to spend that $48 million in the best way possible. Now, this is a 2-year grant also through September 2023. A lot of the focus also with Mr. Marcanio is the summer learning after school programs. There'll be other things that they've got that CNI has planned to do with this. I think we got at least the outline of some pretty good plans to put this to use that will come back to the board and explain in more detail. ESSER 3, nothing yet. That one comes down. It's going to follow the same funding formula as ESSER 1 and 2 in terms of allocation to school districts. ESSER 3 is going to look, based on that, we're looking at double plus ESSER 2. So we're going to be over $100 million with ESSER 3. Maybe I shouldn't have said that, but that's what it looks like based on the formula. So that gets more into heavy infrastructure issues. And that one is not even, DOE is not even dealing with that one with the districts yet. Any questions on the CARES Act plus all the ESSER stuff?
I just want to be clear. So it's federal money, but it comes through the state. And do we then have to write grants to access the money?
We just put an application, they're making it pretty easy.
Okay.
We're just doing more of an application. We've got assurances the superintendent has to sign that we're using it for the intended uses, that sort of thing. And we talked about this last time we had with our lobbyists. The DOE is, I think they're so overwhelmed now with all the ESSER 1s, and we are going to be too, with all the federal, that they're just kind of letting the districts go ahead now, apply for the ESSER 2, the 48, in our case, the 48 million, without getting too much detail, because they're saying send it in. We've got a cover page, we've got an assurance page the superintendent has signed, and we have not even sent a budget up yet. They'll approve it without a budget, but we know what are the allowable uses. So eventually they probably come up with requiring some sort of a description and the amounts in the budget process.
Because there'll be an audit.
Right, and it's all audited the same way with all the federal funds.
Here.
Yes, sir.
Mr. St. Cyr, when Mr. Adams and I were at the finance training for FSBA last week, they talked about one of these grants they closed early. The finance people were taken aback. They said that they thought they had until a certain time, but one of them closed early. You don't know which one that was?
I'm not sure if it's one of those minor grants that were...
It probably was, but Gretchen and Suzanne and Merrill, who all said to say hello to you, were rather shocked that they thought they had a longer time. They said, this is closing.
Okay.
They had just gotten the notice while we were there, so I don't know if you...
Okay, yeah, I'm not sure. I know the ESSER 2 grant application had a pretty short time. We sent it up last week. It was due Monday. There wasn't a whole lot of time. There wasn't a whole lot of time to deal with it.
That's what they're talking about, probably.
Oh, okay. Teresa told me that's the sanitation. I think that's part of the gears.
Yeah, they were rather taken aback, and I thought, well, Terry will be on top of it, and so I guess y'all are.
I think, no, certainly our budget director, Ms. McCants, is totally on top of all the timelines on all these things, and her staff. And there's so many, just imagine what we're doing with federal, and then you're throwing all these other things on. It's a lot to keep up with. It certainly is.
Mr. Chair?
Ma'am, yes.
I just want to make kind of a global comment, because sometimes when we as a public look at the opportunity and we look at all the money that's coming and we make comments that we've got so much money we don't know what to do with it, I think we're doing a disservice because we have been fortunate in this community that our citizens have supported us with our half-cent sales tax, and we have buildings that are in much better shape than many in our state as well as many in the nation. And so, I don't want anybody out there to think that we're struggling with trying to figure out how to spend this money. What the struggles are, if I might ask, would be mostly about how to spend it correctly. Mm-hmm. And so, I just don't want anybody to get the impression that we're not grateful for additional funds. I know that we have air quality issues at many of our schools, and I see this as, as you said, infrastructure. This is an opportunity to use the money in a way that we don't have to use it every year, but we can do those big projects. And I just really want to say that sometimes it makes it sound like we're not grateful, but I want to make sure everyone out there knows we are.
Yes, ma'am. And the thing that we're not used to doing is spending federal on things like air quality and HVAC and all that, and that's what we'll be looking at over the next few years. Because ESSER 3 may last a few years, it's more than 2. I mean, I don't know, but it seems like it may be way out there. But we'll see. There is a lot to do.
And one more comment. This money also allows us to provide jobs and to support the economic development of our community, because with this money, we can keep people employed in doing the jobs that we need to do to support our infrastructure.
But not continuing jobs. That's,
We only need to put the air quality in once.
well, yeah, but then who fixes it? But anyway, Mr. Superintendent?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I just want to add comment. I want to thank Mr. St. Cyr and his team, his department, for managing and navigating through this most unique time financially. This is unprecedented that we've received federal through the state dollars like this. And one thing I'm excited about is yesterday we spoke about our summer school initiative. One of the reasons we're able to be bold with that and to reach out to all of our schools with that is because of these dollars. And I feel like we are targeting those dollars as they were intended to be spent when we activate a program like that and we expand that, because what we're talking about is having those dollars impact directly our students, their learning, and their recovering from the COVID experience if they weren't able to learn the standards in the way they might normally through all the remote platform and so forth. So I just wanted to make that point that it's one of our charges to use those dollars as appropriately as possible and to reach as many kids as possible. And so this really turns out to be an unprecedented opportunity for us to do that. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, let's move on to the, I'm just going to recap the governor, or actually the House and the Senate proposal, which is the next sheet. We've talked about this a little bit already. The difference between the House and the Senate is really not that much. They're pretty close. The only thing that the House does is they put another $4.5 million in case we have a big proration to deal with. Then we would access those what's called the student reserve allocation. That's down at the bottom. But if you go up to the total FEFP funding for both the House and the Senate, the House and the Senate are the last two columns to the right. Total FEFP funding right at $296.7 million, and then the Senate was just a little bit under that. Both of those proposals increase over current year. Let's see. Or decrease over the current year. We're at $304 million now. We based on projections. If we had have gone with our actual, what we would have actually earned, we'd have been significantly less than that. And the House and the Senate proposal used the projections that are up on top, 38,644, and then they come up with 296.7 for the House, which is about $7.8 million below where we're at currently. And then the Senate proposal about $7.8 million, $7.9 million below our current funding level. But that's because of the student population. Okay, any questions on the FEFP? If you look at the teacher salary increase allocation, it's about the fourth highlighted line down. Both of those are holding at about that same level of funding as the current year for the teacher salary increase allocation. So unless there's anything that comes down differently, it'll be the same scenario for the teacher salaries, the 80-20 split, and then we've got to deal with all of that that we went through this year in terms of how to make that allocation. The turnaround school supplemental allocation goes away in the House. That's for the low-performing schools. it remains in the Senate. And the funding compression, which is some extra funding based on average state per pupil funding, the district doesn't get that in the House proposal. You'll see we right at $694,000 in the current year. And that goes away in the House proposal, and the Senate keeps it.
Mr.
Class
St.
size
Cyr,
reduction, yes, sir.
Because that goes away in the turnaround and the funding compression, but in the supplemental academic instruction, they're significantly higher in the House.
Right.
Are those SAI dollars able to be moved and used for the turnaround supplement and funding compression?
They're pretty flexible, so
So
we
they're-
could pretty
they're-
much,
okay.
yeah, yes, sir. We could pretty much go with covering that with some of that
Okay.
as needed.
I'm sorry, I interrupted.
SAI is, there's uses that we typically do with that, extra type things, but it's flexible. It's very flexible. Any other questions? That'll do it for me, unless there's something else. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate all the efforts made to bring us up to date. But we remind everybody the legislature is still in session.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Scariest 2 weeks of the year.
Very perilous. This is when the train starts chugging down the track.
Yes, it does.
Rain bills. Call them garbage bills.
All right, Mr. Superintendent, anything else?
Mr. Chairman, did you want to go over the local agreement at this time?
Comprehensive plan? The interlocal agreement?
Yes.
Yes.
The interlocal.
We're going to put that in as soon as you get.
Okay. I'm completed with my portion.
Okay. All right, so we have copies of the small interlocal agreement, and is Mr. Dennis going to lead us forward in this?
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Good morning. The ultimate objective of this discussion item is to hopefully achieve some consensus from the board as to the suggested language that we would like to take to the staff working group related to both the interlocal agreement that you have in front of you. That's the bigger package. You also are contemplating suggesting some language into the county's comprehensive plan, so there's a small 2-page excerpt of that. What I'd like to do is basically give you a quick, for the benefit of the people listening, a refresher of why we're doing this, and then give you a snapshot of the 4 edits in the interlocal and then the 2 edits in the comprehensive plan, and I'll do that as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
At the bottom of each edit, you'll notice they're footnoted. I know Rob worked on this, and Mr. Adams, and I've added some things as well. There's some pretty good detail as to what each edit is attempting to accomplish. I'm going to give you a quick and dirty summary of that. Before I do that, there are 3 basic documents that comprise the intergovernmental body coordination as it relates to infrastructure and facilities. For the school board, it's our 5-year facility plan survey and plan. For the county, it's their comprehensive plan. And then jointly, we have the interlocal agreement that references both of those to essentially assure and be in compliance with statute that we are coordinating as it relates to a whole host of issues. So having said that, what we're talking about today is interlocal ed, which is the joint document. Your first suggested edit is on page 1. And essentially what it's doing, what we've discovered in the recitals is that most of the commentary seems to suggest that all the burden falls on the school district as it relates to school facilities. And so what we're doing is inserting language that is statutorily referenced that suggests that the county and the city have equal share. Not only, it's not incumbent upon us to simply talk about where we're citing schools, but it's incumbent upon them to help us understand where the developments are going and where the review processes are, so that we don't get ourselves in a jam. So your language is basically talking about the coordination of planning between the school board and governing bodies. And again, this is in the recital, so it's the preamble to the document. Same thing on page 2. And what you notice there is the additional language is actually referencing examples of coordination, and these are examples of the county's activities, where developments are going in place, whatnot. Prior to this, the only references in there were related to the school district citing a facility. So again, it's a two-sided document, and we want to make sure that all parties have ownership in it. The next edit on the interlocal on page 13. And again, I'll call your attention to the footnotes on each of these edits. There's a much more extensive explanation. I'm just trying to give you the Reader's Digest condensed version. This is perhaps the most significant piece. This was actually an omission. Statutorily required that we have coordination between all the governmental agencies as it relates to safe walks to schools, and we all know all the work that Mr. Doss is doing, working with our representatives, bills in the House, all those things, working to try and get those issues that surround this particular challenge resolved. So we are rectifying an omission. It's statutorily required that we demonstrate coordination as it relates to Safe Routes to School program. So we've inserted an entire section in the interlocal so stating. And then the last suggested edit is on page 17. And again, all we're doing here is adding more of that coordination language. In this case, as it specifically relates to the safe walks to schools. And it puts the burden on us to identify all the infrastructure requirements such as sidewalks, bicycle paths, crosswalks, turn lane signalization at the time of the siting of a new school. This was an issue that was a point of contention with the county in the past as we've built new schools, that we could have done a better job with coordination. So we want to assure them that that's our intent, and that's why this language is inserted in the interlocal. So those are your 4 interlocal suggested edits, taking the document from 17 pages to 20 pages. But again, you'll see it's mostly about coordination and rectifying the omission of reference language associated with safe walks. On the comprehensive plan, would you like me to go that and then?
Yes.
On the comprehensive plan, again, it could be perceived as presumptive that we're trying to suggest edits to their document. But in reality, all we're saying is, again, it's the pedestrian bicycle infrastructure language. We're adding those as contemplated topics for both the staff working group and the elected officials joint planning work groups. All we're doing is trying to bolster the awareness that that is an issue that needs to be continuously addressed. So what we're saying is, when they define the types of topics that the joint working group does and the staff working groups address, that we included it in there. So it's not really that presumptive. It's pretty much statutorily required, and therefore we felt like that language needed to be in there. That's all I have, sir.
And these 2 documents will be going to whom?
So the next step in the process, we have a staff working group comprised of elements from the city planning organization and the county planning organization. What I would do is reach out to my counterparts in those areas and ask to assemble the staff working group to address and consider these proposed documents. What has to happen is, because it's a 3-agency collective interlocal agreement, they then would go back to their respective, the county commission and city council. Most likely, they would either want to edit what we've proposed or suggest additional languages of their own. We would come to an agreement, and then we would bring that before the boards concurrently. But what we would do for the school board, certainly before we ever brought it to you to vote on, is bring it back as a discussion item so you can see where we're headed. What we don't want to do is take it to the 3 agencies and then one has exceptions and the other 2 don't. We need to do that so it's a fairly lengthy process. But again, this is a multi-year interlocal, and we're doing somewhat of a mid-year edit, if you will, or midterm edit. So that's the process, sir.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
On page 17, the 6.2, and it refers back to, in the section 6, it refers back to 5.4. And I just want to get the time, so 60 days prior to acquiring or leasing property, the group notifies the county, correct?
Correct.
So within that 60 days, then they have really only 30 days to get back to you and say yay or nay? That this is that the way I read it?
Essentially, that's correct.
Okay. Okay, and so with 6.2, you're identifying all the infrastructure requirements. Does that go with the 60 days, or does that come back after they've approved? That's what I want to know.
I'm going to ask you to repeat that one more time. so
Okay.
I understand it.
All right, so when we send saying that we're going to purchase this property and put a school there, I mean, if we already purchased it, or, because then if when you decide to, or, because the conversations at the planning board have been that we are not coordinating location, we're not coordinating drive, loops and parent pickup and those kind of things, and access to main arteries, et cetera. So my question is, do the infrastructure requirements go in with that first request at 60 days, or is that decided later?
So typically, what's necessary in the related infrastructure, such as deceleration lanes, turn lanes, and whatnot, comes a little bit later because of you have to design the facility and where your ingress points are and where your egress points are before you know what you're going to need on the infrastructure. So it does come later. I would argue that the planning board, we have a fantastic relationship with county planning staff. And sometimes the board and the staff aren't completely aware of what each other is doing.
No, it's the staff that's saying this to me.
Well, I would tell you that Horace is, well, I'm not going to get into
No,
the public record.
but my question is, once we decide to put a building on 9 Mile Road, when do we have the conversation with the county about what is the best way to get parents and students onto that property?
We actually begin the dialogue at the point of property acquisition. They need to know that the region in which we're contemplating citing a school. And then we have to rely on some design work to happen before we can get into more specifics. We have taken the burden upon ourselves using our civil engineers to do the design work for the deceleration lanes and whatnot. But we start right when we purchase a property. I want to make sure you understand too. We've inserted the school board portion here, but this section also deals with the county communicating with us as it relates to developments and all those other things, and they're doing those at the plat phase, which is essentially shortly after the property has been acquired for development. So we emulate what they do.
And that it?
Well, I guess I'm just looking at the annual deadlines as well. But, okay, I just needed to make that clear as to when that happened, whether there was just a specific instance that happened, or whether
I will tell you.
because I know their staff is much like ours. Sometimes they change positions, and it could be just that. So
I will tell you that we both are culpable in coordination deficiencies, in my opinion, for various reasons, whether it be transition of staff, whether it be the speed in which we have to operate to get things done. There's a whole host of things. And there's room for improvement. And that is part of why we're bolstering coordination language edits in these documents so that we understand. If you recall, I gave you all a very detailed summary of every element of the interlocal. And one of the deficiencies I noted was that sometimes we're challenged with who is responsible for bringing the work groups together, who is responsible for doing that. And therein lies part of the breakdown. So we're trying to build collective ownership in this thing so that any of us can convene this. And in fact, what we're about to do will be the first foray that I'm aware of in a fairly lengthy history where we are driving a proposed edit, as we should be able to. And hopefully we'll demonstrate in that process the expectation that the county can do the same with us in the city as well.
I have a question for the attorney. Do we need, as a board, to have this interlocal agreement agreed to even before Mr. Dennis takes it to have a discussion about it?
done this in years past where we've suggested edits to the other.
You might need to go there because
It's
we are,
working.
It's working.
Green light, it's working.
Let's slide a little closer.
since
There we
we're
go.
recording, they need to be able to.
As I said in my interview, the biggest uphill climb I figured would be technology. And we've actually done this in the past in suggesting requesting alterations to the land development code with the county, and we've always done it in this manner, where we come forward with a proposal, and the purpose of a workshop such as today is to determine if you guys are interested in going down this path. And Mr. Dennis is just getting not necessarily explicit permission, but an indication that you guys are on board for him to proceed in this fashion.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's what I was hoping, that we're delivering a document that has been prepared by various people from the school district. And we're not voting on it, but we are saying this is our proposal, and we will welcome you to do your edits and whatever you would like to, and then we'll get into a deeper discussion. So thank you to everybody who has participated in this, and of course this is hopefully helping the bill that we have actually in the legislature for safe walking, and a great accomplishment. So thank you for the work being done. All right.
That's going to say a word.
Word?
Yes. Mr. Dennis, appreciate it, Superintendent, for bringing this. I think this goes a long way in targeting within that 2-mile range, whether it's elementary schools, 1 mile or 1.5 mile for middle schools. I will say, I've said it before, it's time to change the narrative a little bit on this. I think this is a good step to change that narrative. As for Patty's concerns, I believe, for the board members, if there's a school projected to be in your certain area, that discussion needs to go with superintendent, with the county commissioners out front, that if we're going to put a $25 million or $50 million school, then it has to be in a proper location, and it has to have the connections, the sidewalks. I know I told Mr. Bagosh, if, they do put the 50 dwellings per acre on side 8 or another 60 subdivisions, if a school is in the future out there, I had a list of things that they should have agreed to, that they're going to connect this, they're going to put it in a good location so children can access it. They don't have to walk across a commercial industrial park or something to get to it. So we have to have those negotiations along with what Mr. Dennis is doing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. As we move forward, I think we can now get into the agenda for Tuesday night. Do we have any, looking down the list, presentations? And then we'll go down to minutes. Are there any concerns over the minutes that are listed for March?
Yeah, there was an addition to the reports in the beginning. Just want to make sure everybody knew we had an addition to the agenda. We have some additions and deletions.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, Mr. Superintendent, do you want to do that wonderful charge of adding and deleting?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. We do have on page 1, under committee departmental reports, item 4 has been added, and that's the Commissioner's Business Recognition Award. And then also on page 1, under proposed rules, section 2, permission to advertise, item A has been deleted, and that is amendments to Rights and Responsibilities Handbook.
Is that the only 2 items? I only expressed this concern. I don't know why it was deleted, but time-wise, we're in good shape for the R&R book to be ready to go for next school year.
That is a very good question. We have checked into that, and we will be hoping to have this and the May meeting, and that will be a little tight for us, but we think we can, it's going to be tight getting the copies to our elementaries. So we'll have to work with the vendor who's publicating that for us and make sure we get that on time. So that's going to be our charge. It will be a little tight. Of course, our secondary is electronic, so that won't be an issue at those levels.
Okay. If there's a need for a special meeting, you will let us know, because we don't want to begin the year.
Yes, thank you for that. And that may be a possibility that we may want to exercise in the summer to make sure it's all about getting it to the copier, the vendor who makes the copies.
Right. I think everybody needs to understand it's not a matter of concern over the book. It's a matter of having it ready for students and parents at the beginning of the school year in August.
That's going to be the push, yes.
That's the push. Thank you, sir.
Mhm.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Go right straight down. Since we will have no new business or unfinished business, we will go straight into the consent agenda. Do I have any questions about C&I?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, I know I am right hand.
I know you're looking at Mr. Adams.
No, I'm looking at my.
You're looking at the beautiful side of the table, I guess.
Well, would y'all like to move over there? That would be fine. Okay.
I just wondered, Mr. Marcanio, when we had our discussion, I had asked about, this is kind of both 1 and 2, because it's the CDAC agreements, and there were 2 middle schools that were not covered. Did you determine why those were not covered?
Yes, Ms. Coots checked on that. Excuse me. And she can come up and speak to it. But generally, with limited resources, we look at where the needs are greatest in terms of those services.
Okay.
And that is why the schools that are represented on those items are what they are.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Are there any other items under curriculum?
I want to talk about under continuous improvement. I don't know if anybody has anything before that.
Where are you looking?
I'm looking at the external operators agreements.
Okay. Yes. No. Anybody before that? Okay. Questions?
I appreciate the presentations yesterday, and I wanted to ask one question kind of before I get to my specific questions. Mr. Superintendent or Mr. Marcanio, if Mr. Brummert is right and Warrington becomes a C, what happens?
So that's a little, there's some background on this. The waiver that the commissioner issued indicates that when the test score data comes out, there is an option for a school to submit a request to have a grade calculated. And that is designed for the turnaround schools. That must be submitted within a 30-day window after the data comes out. And then the turnaround for that, the determination would most likely be, I believe, the beginning of September. Now, what we were charged with as far as the principal placement was if the data does not come out favorably, indicating movement of a grade level, then a change would have to take place. So that was the stipulation that was put into place, which becomes very tricky with timelines, beginning of school year and so forth.
Well, I guess my question then is, are we going to put the external operator in place at Warrington no matter what the outcome?
Yes, we will need to have an external operator at Warrington for the upcoming year. That is a requirement for us.
Okay, even if they progress?
Mr.
There is a provision in the contract that if the school earns a C for the 2021 school year, then the contract terminates, if that's your question.
Well, I just didn't know whether we were going to exercise that or not, even, because, again, support structures, once you get to a place, do you remove the support? I knew that was in there, and that's why I was asking the questions, because we know our state does this to us often. They'll give us support for things, and then once somebody gets 1 point above the line, then they take all that support away. So I was kind of getting to that point where I was going to ask that question next.
I don't read the language of the contract as giving any kind of leeway. The phrasing is contract is terminated.
Okay.
But if
that
it
is
is
correct.
If it is the sort of thing that it appears that the school needs more support, then I imagine that's something that could be renegotiated.
Okay.
And that's where it gets a little tricky, because we have an extension, but then we also have the waiver. So there's kind of two pieces working there. So thank you for that clarification. That's a great point on it.
Okay, do we have some speakers from,
Well, we have questions related to the contract first.
who had their finger up first?
Go with him, he's closer to you.
The only thing I wanted to state, I believe with that letter grade going up, you got to have at least 90% tested.
That is
It's
correct.
going to be a high bar probably to get to.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
95% is good. 90% we could
you
We could make the request.
a waiver
Right.
on that.
Yeah. But below that, not an
No.
option.
No option. Yes.
All right. My question came to, in reading the contract and seeing the timelines and knowing that clause was in there, the issue becomes training for next year starts long before those determinations could be made.
Yes.
Would it be in the best interest of the students and the school and the teachers to then have that clause take effect and have the current operator trying to come in after everything has already happened, preparing for the next year? So do we make the commitment that regardless of what happens, we stay with the new external operator, because changing back is going to be very problematic? But the question, and I didn't ask it earlier because I really didn't think about it, and I apologize, Mr. Marcanio, don't want to do anything that's a blindside, but it has to do now more with, in the contract, the new external operator is in on the selection of the principal. So is there going to be a principal already designated different than the one who's currently there? And then if it comes back as a C, do we keep the same principal? Are we going to end up having to do what we didn't want to do just because of timelines and because of the way things roll out for the preparation of the next year? It's kind of like we're committing to do something that we legally can change, but we may not be able to change once we get this train going down the track.
And you have articulated the complexity very well, because those are truly challenging dynamics. The other piece, too, is, let's say we did have 91% of the students take the exams, and we're very close. That's a big decision if we move forward to the grade and we don't make the grade, if we're right on the line. So there are some great complexities to this. Now, I will tell you, I've contacted the state to seek clarification if we're still required to follow those contingencies, those requirements that the state board has assigned to us, and we were strongly encouraged to do that, to continue as directed. So those contingencies are still necessary, which of course some of those are very challenging.
Well, strongly encouraged and having
must.
to are two different things. You know, my wife's mother strongly encouraged her to look elsewhere, but she didn't. She could pay for that. I mean,
I believe that
you're watching, dear.
I believe it was so with DOE. When we talk to DOE, they don't really have it's not in their wheelhouse to decide upon. So we sought as close as we can get to paint us the picture here, and that recommendation came back to us.
Yeah. Do you anticipate that before your opportunity to speak in front of the State Board of Education comes, that you will have any grades that would have any impact on that presentation to them?
What we won't have
The grades being.
we won't have the state assessment test results by then. I don't think. I think that board meeting will come before we get feedback on that, because the window for testing has been expanded into early June. So we're anticipating the data to come back very end of June, early July sometime in that time frame. Mr. Marcanio, am I correct on those times?
I would agree with that timeline. Yes, sir. Highly unlikely that early June we would have assessment data results. I would like to just remind you, Dr. Smith, we do have representatives here from LSI.
Yes.
If you want to put a face with the name of the company that is collaborating with us, they have been good partners throughout this, the working on this contract. And so whenever you're ready, I'd ask Mr. Wilson to come to the mic and introduce them.
I have questions for them, too.
Okay.
Of course you do. Let me check to my right, Mr. Wilson, to make sure that there's no fingers in the air. They're good. They have thumbs down. Okay.
Does Dr.
All right.
Adler have anything?
You have you've got a rate? I'm sorry. Here, would you like to throw something at me? Or?
Don't tempt her. She's got a bus to throw at you.
I have my brothers outside the door to take care of you. Mr. Superintendent, I'd just like for you to clarify something for the public, because I received some phone calls last night after we left the meeting. Some believe that it's all over this school term, but that is the difference between, is it done this school term, or is the extension to give you the whole year? So if you just explain that a
Yes.
little bit.
Thank you for that question, because it does get complicated. So the extension is in effect. So we are not having any accountability data that comes with consequences given for this summer. So that's the big change. That extension will carry us through. So the 2021-22 school year, at the end is when grades, we will return to the full accountability system. So that's the timeline.
Yeah, that was my explanation. I just felt like they needed to hear that from you.
Yes. Thank you for that. Yes.
Sure. But that, in essence, isn't true, because we are going to impose those consequences long before the end of next school year. The consequences that would have happened this year are going to happen regardless of a waiver and extension.
Well, the consequence, had we not received the
waiver
how
and
can
extension.
I say this clearly?
Okay, we need a flow chart?
We do. So let's take the executive order off the table just for clarity purpose.
Okay.
So had we not received an extension and it was a normal accountability cycle year, so grades would come out in July, let's say, and we didn't have an extension, if Warrington earned a D this year, then we would be forced with one of two choices, and that's to close the school or to have a charter come in.
Okay.
So the extension, really, that's the piece that is being extended, pushed back a year.
All right.
And I get the waiver is what gets, you got the extension and the waiver, so that can be confusing.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
And that's what I was talking about yesterday, and I actually talked to the board attorney about this because, really, we were underneath emergency order during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
They were not using any punitive to any schools. So are we being singled out in the whole state of Florida that during this COVID crisis, and now we got another extension from the governor, or the commissioner signed the executive order. So that was my question, is why, how is this happening? Legally. Legally, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
And so from a timeline stance, and I say this just for listeners to hear, the timeline, the extension was granted in March. The waiver then just came out recently in this month of April. So the extension occurred, of course, prior to the waiver. So the stipulations or requirements that we were given and assigned to do still exist. The waiver doesn't cancel those out.
So the answer is
How's that
maybe.
for clarity?
Yeah. Mr. Wilson, you're up.
Morning. Okay. I do have two representatives from Learning Sciences International, James Mills and Rob Bellos, and they're here if you have any questions.
I don't know if they have questions, if they'd like to make statements. I'm sure there are questions, but if you'd like to come up and introduce yourselves, that would be fine.
Good morning, Board. My name is James Mills. I'm Executive Director for the School Turnaround Division of Learning Sciences International, and with me today, my colleague.
My name is Rob Bellis, and I'm the National Director for School Turnaround. I work across the nation to develop school improvement initiatives.
And Board, we appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning and would be welcome and open to any questions or concerns that you may have. But I do want to say, first and foremost, as an external operator provider here within the state of Florida, we are hoping for the best as well for Warrington. I mean, we want to see the sea as well. We didn't get into this line of work as an organization, to make money and to shift things. We truly are a community school organization. We want people to maintain that local control. And I will tell you, your support team has been wonderful to work with. I would say that across the state, we get opportunities to do this across the country. And the professionalism, the collegiality, the collaboration has been greatly appreciated and something to be proud of.
Thank you. Questions?
You want to go that way first or this way?
I'm going to look left first.
Good morning. Thanks for being here. One of the things that I had a discussion with the CNI team about is I attended several sessions of the National School Boards Association, and we talked about, in many of those, the relationship in the community. And so I had written down in my notes, town hall meeting at Warrington Middle, just to get some conversation going within the community itself. And I was glad to hear that that is a piece that you intend to implement fairly quickly. Would you like to elaborate on that and be
Yes,
sure
ma'am.
that they're telling me the truth?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. And it's not a one-time only piece. So pending board approval of the contract during the week of April the 26th, during the school comprehensive needs assessment, we would have a community-wide event to come together. We would do it in collaboration with the district to basically say, this is what the partnership looks like, this is what it will feel like. And it doesn't start from a deficit model. It doesn't make the assumption that parents and community members do not want to be involved in the school. It assumes that they do, and we just want to give them the opportunity to be involved and to have a voice, and also to give them, here are the multiple opportunities that you have. But it doesn't stop there. That continues each quarter with those, getting that feedback, making sure that that voice is heard, and whether that be from students that are attending an alternative site but they're homeschooled, that we want to hear from those parents as well. And those are done in tandem with quarterly curriculum nights that are opposite of the community night. And so almost on a month-to-month basis, with the exception of November and December typically, we are reporting back to the community saying, here's what's going on, here's what we're working on, here's the progress we're making, here's what your students can experience, and really just, again, making sure that they have that voice, that they feel welcome on campus. And we do want to hear what's going well, what's not going well, but that community aspect, social media support is included in that. We work in tandem with the district's public relations team to make sure that these news releases are done in tandem so that it truly shows the community as a whole what the district is doing to partner and support, in this case, Warrington Middle School. Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Sometimes I forget what time it is. Anyway, thank you for coming to our district. My question is, what skills or uniqueness do you bring to this district that are not already here or that is not capable of providing?
Yeah, this is a great question, Dr. Eller. And as an organization, we typically, again, don't start from a deficit model. And I will say that's one of the bright spots that we've experienced here in working with ESCAMBIA so far, is you do have a wonderful base of professionals and expertise that already exist here. So to say that it doesn't already exist, I wouldn't want to be disingenuous and try to find something to make it up, because you do have great folks who work here. But what I would say as an organization, we don't have anyone involved in the work we do in schools that hasn't already done this work. Rob and I myself, even at our level, are former turnaround principals and district leaders. Our school leadership coaches are the same. We do put those requirements in place through our interview process as well as our hiring and support process. But it also attends to for example, our ELA coaches, our math coaches, our science coaches. They have to have that documented experience in a turnaround school. And for example, here in Florida, if it is an external operator partnership, they have to have that experience from here in Florida. So they understand the standards, the test item specs, the demands that are placed on that. And that school leadership coach relationship is so critical, because what we don't have is, we don't have, say, a leadership coach and a principal. They're not butting heads. They're coming together. They're managing the school on a day-to-day basis together. It truly is a team effort, and we do that from the very beginning with the district until the day we leave the partnership. And our main goal is always to return the school back to the district for local control to avoid any type of closure, conversion to charter pieces.
Do you make or profess any kind of guarantee that the support works?
Yes, ma'am. We are the only EO provider in the state that has had 100% success with exiting schools from EO. As a matter of fact, many of you have probably followed South St. Pete with Lakewood Elementary School. The story there is absolutely beautiful. It was the lowest performing elementary school in the state of Florida 3 years ago with 23 percentage points. Through that relationship with the district and the amazing support and collaboration, they are targeted this year. They are projected, not just from our data, but from state data, to exit either with a high C or a low B. So that is extremely, and this is coming from a school where they had 80% teacher turnover that year. And what really made this effective is the collaboration between the district, LSI's external operator, and the school. And so, absolutely, Rob,
one
please.
of the things also at Lakewood that is astounding is, they had an 80% teacher turnover rate. It's now the highest requested school for teachers to transfer into in 3 years, from the highest turnover to it's the #1 requested school for teachers to work in Pinellas County. And when we look at the difficulty of hiring teachers now and keeping teachers and teachers' retention, that's one of the things that we also focus on, is getting quality people in place with systemic reforms so it's sustainable and they want to be there.
Last question. Do we get our money back if you don't succeed? Don't answer that. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Yes, what I was going to ask is, have you already looked into what we're currently doing there? Are you going to be providing recommendations after we vote to approve you're going to start that recommendation process But I mean, do you see anything that we need to do now? And you know, Representative Fine said it the other day on this committee, districts are swimming in federal dollars. So I've said it the other day to the principals, anything that we need, any extra coaching, whatever, we need to use those federal dollars to turn around.
Right. And I think as part of our approach to partnering with districts, we go in eyes wide open, right? So we basically say, give us the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I will say that nothing has been kept from us, and we appreciate that in that conversation. And I will say the allocation of resources just in the initial discussion, because we wanted to put together a proposal that was going to be specific and work for Warrington Middle. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. But with the staffing pieces that are in place, with the support structures that are being provided from the district, I would be proud of it. If I was the principal of the school right now, I would be proud of what we're seeing. And I think that's a testament to the work that's been done to this point. But to your other point in terms of making the recommendations, that would come very quickly after the school comprehensive needs assessment, which, pending board approval next Tuesday evening, we would initiate that work the very next morning. Typically, and I know you've experienced this before, this timeline is usually 3 or 4 months, right, leading up to it. Mm-hmm. But with all the changes, we're definitely prepared to move forward very quickly.
Mr. Fetzko, anything?
Not a question, just a comment. I welcome expertise. I know that the school, the community, the district wants the best for all of our students. Every student in the district needs to achieve, needs to succeed, and if you're able to support that, then we're 100% with you. Anything that sounded negative wasn't a negative, because at LSI, it's frustration with the state processes and procedures, and it's a little bit more of a personal note, having contact with current administration and leadership, and knowing that could be all turned over for, well, if students succeed, it's all for the right reason.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yes, ma'am.
I was letting this go down before I came back.
They all had one, yes.
So you referred to Lakewood. My question is, how many other schools have you come into in just 1 year made this change?
Absolutely, it's a really good question. We work very closely, you're probably familiar with Seminole County, with Pinecrest, who is at the brink of, they had an additional extension, and they either had to do that or they had to choose an EO provider. We worked with them in 1 year, and were able to make sure that they didn't have to actually, to do that. Currently, right now, McLaughlin Middle School, which is in Polk County, in the Lake Wales area, they started with us last year, but did not have the opportunity to, of course, get a grade. They are projected this year by us as well as the state to exit, which would be, of course, the 1 year with us. So the support pieces that you see in here are targeted to exit a school within 1 year. And again, regardless of the number of points. Typically, what the state board looks at is they want to make sure an EO provider can have at least 4 percentage points in there. We're committing to you, regardless of what the outcome is for Warrington. We will do everything we possibly can in tandem to exit them within this year. Absolutely.
And I had one more question. Hiring, back to kind of Dr. Edler's comments, and we know, do you usually hire most of your, I'm assuming most of your, presuming, most of your coaches may not come from the local area, but do you have resources to bring people from other areas into the school? You know, we were talking yesterday about 80% of the teachers in their VAM scores and all those things. And so, you know, we have a need for teachers everywhere, not just at Warrington. And so, you know, that may be a daunting task. So do you have resources?
Absolutely. Internally, absolutely. And I'm in the Panhandle myself. I live over in the Tallahassee area. I did live here in Pensacola and went to school here and have formed a lot of those bonds. So we've, again, pending board approval of it, we've already started reaching out to individuals to say, hey, maybe you'd like to come over here and enjoy ESCAMBIA County a little bit in terms of the teacher side. Same thing on our side. We have plenty of Florida support staff, at least internally, with our team. And one of the unique pieces that we do as a provider is when one of those ELA, math, science, or social studies teachers happens to be out, one of our team members are in there teaching grade level instruction that day. So if if there's a sub issue, if there's a vacancy, we are covering that to make sure that that continuity of instruction is happening. It's vital. Especially in this third year, the acceleration that's necessary, that is a service that's included as part of our support structure.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, there was a comment at the Board of Education meeting he went to that we used the light version with our previous external operator. Are we using the version that Richard Corcoran approves? I mean, he's not going to tell us in a year we used the medium.
Yes, sir. You are using the model. I will
But
say
I
that
want
this
him to
is
speak
the
up now before
top of the
we,
model. Yes,
a
sir.
year from now.
Yep.
Okay.
So we have actually brought in, and we're using our highest accelerated model that we offer.
Okay.
We're putting everything out. We're kicking off a similar one in New Orleans right now. And we know that there's certain situations, we have a short period of time, we have to get results. You know, your community deserves it, your children deserve it, and really that's our passion and mission. I'm retired, I do this for fun now. And by the way, from a business development guy, please don't ever say you ever have open checkbooks. I'm going to follow you out the room tonight. But we really are committed to getting you where you need to be as rapidly as we can.
Thank you, sir.
Anything else?
One other comment, and I know you're aware of this, but, one of the struggles that Warrington Middle probably has had is because of this constant state of turnaround and the insecurity that community has from year to year. There's whether that school will still be there. So I think, that is why I think it's really important to talk to the community. That was Wednesday, I attended another seminar. I love Zoom, you can just do all this stuff.
Right.
And they were talking about, this particular school was in California, but they talked about, they had gone through a process of finding out what the obstacles were for their students to get to school for attendance. Because they said, the principal and the teachers thought they had an amazing relationship with their parents until they really got down into talking with them about what their real obstacles were. So, I think part of the problem at Warrington Middle is that insecurity is, why should I care if the school could be gone next year? So I think that's one of the pieces that we've really got to address, and hopefully y'all can make that. I know that the people that have been there this year have been really working hard, and last year they were working hard, and then COVID hit. But the state's making us do what we got to do.
Yes, ma'am. And I will say to your point, Ms. Hightower, we do take the culture and climate piece very seriously. In terms of teachers being respected as individuals, we highly recognize food service, bus drivers, we ask bus drivers, hey, be a part of this. We ask our paraprofessionals, and they see themselves in a new light. They do. They see the amazing value that they do provide, and we do go above and beyond to make sure that they feel included and that they see their roles. And to your point about some of the obstacles, the navigator piece that you have in place is very powerful. It's another model that works extremely well in external operator schools, so you're being applauded for that in the allocation as a district. But what you will find is that as our team is working within the district, we will oftentimes stay over on weekends. We will visit local churches. We will go to some civic pieces to talk to parents and community members. We'll say, do you have a child, a grandchild, or a great-grandchild at the school? Let us tell you what's going on. Okay, what do you need? What can we help you with? So we're not just a standalone. So when you think about LSI and ESCAMBIA County, think about it just like this. We're hand in hand, to do this, and we are accountable to you. We are accountable to you. It's in there, just lock stock in the contract, and we're also mutually accountable to the team here as well. So.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I've seen across the state that even Miami-Dade was reporting yesterday they've got a high rate of failure with African Americans. Are you seeing now with this, and it's remote, by executive order, I think it was 70, 80,000 across the state they sent letters to that are failing remote. How is that impacting your turnarounds you have now?
What we did, so let me step back and say our approach started very early on when the initial changes happened, last February into March, by saying there were some policies and procedures that were put in some of those districts, we worked directly with those districts to take away the open enrollment of the transition with students back. So we made sure that students were able to come back on a rolling basis. And so what we also did was work with them to redesign those schedules so that that continuity of instruction stayed in place. And so I can speak specifically to Lakewood that they were at any given time between 70 to 90% of their students. They did not have the drop-off because of those techniques and those pieces. McLaughlin, which is a middle school, was a little bit tougher once you get to the secondary level, but they also had commiserate numbers and are now approaching that 90% point as well.
Yeah, I think we still got a high number at Warrenton remote.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Any other questions? I hope you can kind of get a feeling from this. Warrenton is very important to us, not just because it gets that recognition and of being a low-performing school. It's important because all our kids are important to us. We feel like we have supplied outstanding leadership. They have been training our teachers and working with them. And if people would leave us alone, I think we'll take care of the problem. But since that's not going to be the way it is, we challenge you and ask for your help. And I have to say, I like the fact that you seem to be prepared, you seem to be ready, you have experience. So the school board of Escambia County is all behind you, and we're behind Warrenton Middle School. And we are very, very challenged to try to find the piece of the puzzle that will make this go away. And so thank you for coming. And if there's no more questions.
I just want to make one comment. I made it to the CNI team, but please make sure that the board is aware when you're doing community events, because we would probably like to come and see what's happening.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a standard operating procedure for us as well, yes.
Okay. Mr. Superintendent, anything you need to say?
And thank you all for being here and for sharing your experience and insights. Mr. Chairman, I really thank you for what you just shared. I think that is the sentiment and the feeling and the passion that all of us collectively have is that Warrenton is an incredibly special place, and our kids are so important. And so we're really thankful to partner together to do the very best we can for each student at Warrenton Middle School. So thank you very much. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
very much.
Thank you.
All right. Any other items under curriculum?
Do you want to take us through the summer program since you changed some things, or?
Yes, sir. So thank you. I wanted to make sure you saw, I gave you a hard copy of the amended summer school document. So as soon as we're finished here today, my office will get this to Ms. DeWeese so it can get posted to the agenda. So what we did essentially is a couple of things. We went ahead and added each of the elementary sites to the document to serve those students at their own sites. So that is that is one of the major changes to the document. We also updated student projection numbers for the elementary, middle, and high school programs. Keep in mind, these are projections, but we went ahead and did that. And we also adjusted the budget pages for additional personnel associated with serving the students at the elementary schools on their sites and so forth. That is a significant increase in staff, and I just want to make sure that the board understands that there may very well be staffing challenges associated with serving the students with this particular model. Now that we're on each elementary site, as you know, I'm sure we will have to have security on each site that we're serving students. Then health technicians and so forth. Going to need a significant more number of them and so forth. So we're going to do our best to work with those human resources. But I just want to make sure that that you hear that there could be some challenges associated with hiring enough people to serve with this particular model. But those are essentially the major changes to the document. We've updated the numbers and so forth. And again, the projections for the elementary, middle, and high school programs based on the best data that we have at this time. So, be happy to answer.
Okay, yeah. Mr. Dennis, are you anticipating any, as he's just said, he's worried about having enough teachers. What about, since we're going to each elementary school, are you anticipating some issues with our bus service?
The short answer is yes.
Okay.
And food service and
Yeah.
protection service coverage. But we will figure it out.
How many campus security officers do we presently have employed at the district level?
I believe Kyle can answer specifically. I think we're at 23. But we also have a safety officer who's in the back of the room who's also a certified CSO.
Say that again.
It's something 5. 45.
25, not 23.
Oh, too bad. I thought
25.
it was 45. That would be
Yeah.
good.
Okay. Anything else, Ms. Hightower?
And I just,
Dr. Edler?
Thank you. Thank you for this comprehensive report. All my life, I have been taught to follow directions, live by the rules. I have problems with this little form. I think I've mentioned that before. And I think that the information that is provided on this form is limited by the form. If we look down to your pillars, the first thing that I see is include number and definition of pillar, goal, and measurable objectives. But when I read the information that's there, in my opinion, it is not following the rules. It's limited in the information that is printed in that little box. And so I don't know if that's why more information is not provided because of the little space. Might have to do like kindergarten right outside the line. But I don't know, and I've mentioned this before, it says number, but I get percentages here. And to me, that's not a number. It is different than percentage. That's my interpretation. But I don't see any measurements. How are you going to know that this was a successful program so that you can kind of use that as a guide as you move on? What information do we get to tell us that we succeeded in what we attempted to do? And receive some data that would help us to make decisions later.
Yes, ma'am. In terms of student outcomes, certainly at the high school level, those students that capture a credit, or increase their GPA as a result of doing coursework to meet graduation requirements, I mean, that would be your measure for success at the high school level. At the elementary and middle school levels, we have the STAR 360 that we can use to do another assessment to determine whether there's increased in proficiency. The iReady projects learning gains, and so we have those tools to use to measure outcomes from the program.
I understand that, but everybody that reads this document, do they know that's how they're supposed to measure this? And it appears to me that it's listed here as an instruction or direction that it should be provided, and I'm saying that it is not being provided so that everybody who picks up this document or look at your program are not going to be able to determine if you were successful. I'm just saying follow the instructions, put the information in the little box, or stretch the little box so that it can hold more information.
Yes, ma'am.
That's all, I'm sorry.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Mr. Marquinhos, these projections for elementary school, is it based on the amount of students right now that y'all have determined that are academically behind?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Mr. Fetzko?
I thank the CNI staff for the monumental work that they did in such a quick time, and for the expansion to make sure that we do cover all of them. That was something that was asked very quickly. So the work and effort put forth, I thank all of your CNI leaders. And I'm glad to see that we have increased to get all those students in. I think it's needed. I think this is going to be a recovery summer more than it is an expansion summer, that if we could get the students caught up from what they missed during this past year, we will have really done them a great service and the community a service.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
I would like to echo what Mr. Fetzko has said. I want to thank the superintendent, Mr. Marcanio, and his staff for coming up with the idea of all schools. It may cause problems to the gentleman in front of you that is losing all his hair, but at the same time, why is it that row has so little hair? I don't understand.
A lot of stress.
A lot of stress there. But at the same time, I remember from high school days in administrating that whenever you ask a student to change the location of something, they're less likely to do it. And so my appreciation for the fact that a child will be given the opportunity to go to their school is so important and so well done. I thank you for that. I once again, I wish the ones best of luck. And you're right. I mean, it's teachers like their time off, and they may not, people always say, oh, they'll do it for the money. No, that's not true. But a lot of challenges, but the efforts for what we're doing for the students is very, very important and very well done. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Have we started the survey process with the teachers and other employees, whether they'd be willing to work this summer?
Yes, sir. We have got a sense of how many teachers are interested in working, particularly at the elementary level, but yes, sir.
Right.
Okay.
And how are we reaching out to the parents to share with them that there's an opportunity for their student for the summer?
So our schools are starting to do that now. I don't have the details on that again, but they will be informed that we have summer school at their campus, and we will start the registration process very quickly here.
So by our meeting in May, would you have any numbers for us?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I know that because I have a niece who is a curriculum coordinator. She has been telling me what she's been taxed with, and that they are taking every opportunity they can to individually contact every student and explain to their parents how important this might be, not for this year, just for this year, but for the future. And the things that might have been missed, and especially with a lot of our remote in, remote out students. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, the efforts are going on, and it's going to be challenging, but we have to start, and they've already started. So, thank you very much. Are there any other questions on summer school and the programs we'll be offering? Okay, thank you very much. Anything else under curriculum? Any questions on the calendar? I
had a hard time figuring out what was changed. I couldn't see that asterisk.
We need larger asterisks for Ms. Hightower.
Yes, sir.
All right. Finance and business services. Any items you would like to discuss in that area? Not everybody at once, okay.
I just wondered about this. This is an annual agreement. It's number 15 under purchasing, the group medical benefits, including prescription drugs. Is there anything unusual about that one or that's different? I don't know that Mr. Wyndham is the one in charge. Mr. Dombrowski pointed at him, made him come.
Good point, Mr. Dombrowski.
This was an improvement to the agreement we already had in effect for 2020. So it was an improvement. Rebates for prescription drugs were going to be more rebated, so we would bring in more revenue. And it also extended the term for a fixed rate. So it was an improvement.
So this is a good thing.
Yes, ma'am.
Better.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
want to make sure everybody understood that.
Just stay there. Mr. Chair,
Go right ahead.
you may be the person to answer the one on 7 under purchasing, the drug screening. That's an increase or drug screening, E7.
Correct. That's pre-employment drug screening.
Right. Is this an increase, or what was the actual cost for this year? Are we anticipating something very different?
No, this is a state contract. So we participate in the statewide contract that's bid on it's usually a several-year agreement. And this is, as far as the amount that I've got, the $65,000, that should be sufficient to cover the cost of all pre-employment drug screenings. This is actually for all permanent and also subs. That increased 2 or 3 years ago. We were having a lot of problems with, we're not testing all subs. We started testing all subs. It's been about, again, 3 years ago, because we were having a lot of problems where reasonable suspicion testing and all those things were revealing that we were having a lot of problems with subs. So we started doing that just to make sure, because those subs many times will become permanent employees. But yeah, this is not an increase. This is about the amount that we normally had in the last year.
Okay, and are you also the security crossing guard person? Or securities? And number 6, it's a bid for security and crossing guard services.
That would be protection services.
Okay. It's not a real question. My thought, or an easy one, how many crossing guards do we actually have?
So we actually employ Securitas for our ancillary facilities. They have one unique service that they provide for us at Ferry Pass Middle. Most of our crossing guards are staff trained. We actually have protection services that does crossing guard training for all of our elementary school staff members that want to participate in that process.
Okay, so it's really just one crossing guard for the district and the other is the security guy.
But because he serves in that capacity and this is their contract, we need to articulate that, and that's why it sits like that.
All right, thank you.
So, if I might, I thought the state required the crossing guard training, but we do it in-house?
That's correct. Our protection services staff administers that.
All right, now I have a question, another one down the line.
Would anybody like to go before Ms. Hunter? No, okay, go ahead.
On the Lakeview Judy Andrews renovation for flooring, it indicates that we're using half-cent sales tax money. Is that a project that was already on the books, or did we take that money from a project where we were underbid? Or
that project was not on the books. You're absolutely correct. This is from excess proceeds, either interest or savings from projects that did come into the budget.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I probably know the answer to this already, but are we allowed to test students who may have had a previous complaint?
And
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Test them for what?
Are we talking about drugs or substance up here? Wasn't that the conversation?
That
we have a program
Employee drug.
for those.
That's employee drug
Mr.
testing.
Leonard's answering.
Excuse me?
We do have a program with students that are involved in extracurricular activities.
Right.
Oh, okay.
But I don't think
Would you say that
was-
again? I'm sorry.
We have a program where students of extracurricular activities are chosen by lottery to take a drug test.
Yes, it's a random
Random?
sampling.
Random, right,
Sample.
absolutely, absolutely. It just occurred to me, the complaints that we had, discipline of students who have had issues being suspended for the drug use, sales, whatever. And I just wanted to know if we were able to do that, and maybe by HIPAA we can, I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, there's no suspensions that occur with what Mr. Leonard was talking about, our student drug testing program that we have for middle and high school students. That's specifically for children that are participating in extracurricular activities, driving or parking on campus, band, football, baseball, all those types of things. So they are randomly tested. We're on hold right now because of COVID issues, so we did put that on hold a couple months ago. But they're not suspended from school in any shape, form, or fashion. They're just pended or suspended from extracurricular activities until they complete a program. But it has nothing to do with a child that gets arrested that may go through the normal disciplinary process. That's a completely different issue.
I'm done. I said I probably had the answer already.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Okay, we're still under business and finance. Unless no one has anything, we'll move to human resources. Human resources.
Are we on HR?
HR, you got it.
I want to talk about a couple of the job descriptions on here. The first one is approve the following job description for the administrative salary schedule, effective coordinator, marketing, and public relations. As the board is tasked with creating job descriptions, and I did have a conversation with the superintendent, so he's not surprised by what I'm about to say. I had two concerns with the position. The first concern was I thought, the reason I had to definitely have a conversation is because I had a vision, and I didn't know that my vision was the same as his. I really think this should be a report to the superintendent. No offense to the deputy, but I do believe it should be a reports to the superintendent. If we're looking at someone to get out messages from the superintendent's office to our media sources, I think that they should come out of the superintendent's office rather than the deputies. But I told him I'm one of five, so I needed to hear from other people. And then the other, and so you can weigh in on both. The other is under minimum requirements. I asked him specifically why a school administration master's degree would qualify somebody for this position. In my mind, we need to delete school administration because it says or related fields are equivalent. If in the interview process there's something else that comes along, I just don't want somebody to think that because they have a master's degree in school administration, they're qualified for this job.
I think other experiences would have to be the thing that would fall into that. I'm thinking about a previous PIO who did have the master's in school administration, but also had a master's in journalism and in other fields related to media and news, journalism and things like that. So they could have that. I think it opens it up to some things. Unless a person had that kind of background experience and other training, I would agree with you that just administrative with no other may not feel the needs that we as a board have discussed in regards to marketing and publicity and getting information to the public.
You want to respond because it's your...
Well, I'm a little, are you concerned that a school administrator would be given priority over other people with?
I am concerned because when I had my conversation with Mr. Leonard, I asked specifically, is this an and, or is this an or? So And my understanding from him was that it could be a master's degree in communications, a master's degree in public relations, a master's degree in school administration, and none of the other things would have to matter. That if you had, you, Mr. Slayton, with a master's in school administration, could apply for this job and think you had a shot at it. And I'm just trying to stipulate that this particular position is for public relations, marketing, and communications, not for school administration. But I understand that if you have some of that knowledge, it gives you a couple of extra points to know how a system works. But I think the question is, do we need them to know how a system works, or do we need to get the message the superintendent wants to get out to the community? Is that the higher skill set? So that's my concern, is that I don't want that to be a fallback. I'd rather somebody have to go back and re-advertise than to settle for somebody who had one of those degrees.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, for me, I just want to leave as much freedom to choose the best person for that job. So I don't want to get down to micromanaging who's going to be right there with you every day, because we could think of Tallahassee. I think of Billy Ann, a few other people that type down there in Tallahassee that could easily fit into that job, you know. So I would like to leave as much a wide area for you to be able to choose the perfect person that has all that social media skills. So as for who reports to you and all that, to me that's just up to you. But I'm sure you're going to be working with that person every day anyway, just about it.
Yes.
To get out the good news about the district and all the things we're doing.
Yeah. So
Let me see if this. Let me group all the questions, and then you can. You have anything?
Not yet.
Not yet. Adler? Yes, sir.
Okay, so the two questions I think are, first of all, I think they're important questions, and we did have a conversation about the reporting and whether that to be a direct report or not, and I will share with you that I also had a conversation with our extraordinarily talented deputy superintendent about this, because we do want to structure it the best way we can, and so we're very comfortable with making that change to have that as a direct report. And one of the things that surfaced from that is a lot of times things happen quickly, very quickly, and so I really do see this person being almost tethered to my side, because this is a really important position. This is a very symbolic piece of where we're structuring our communications in a very thought out way. I would like to add a couple positions to it, but I didn't do that because of finances, because I felt we needed to just start with this piece. This is an administrative position, so I want this person eventually down the road. My dream is for this person to lead a couple others in having a very robust communications department. So I would be in agreement with that, to make that a direct report to me, that position. As far as the master's degrees, that really doesn't weigh heavily on me in neither direction. I think I'll just share with you the type of candidate that it will be sought is one who has a strong communications media background, one who can really interact with our media in the community in a very effective way, strong writing skills, strong verbal skills, strong decision-making skills, and also the ability to lead if we're able to add some positions to the future. And where I'd really like to add to in the future is videography, and social media continues to grow, and so we need a PIO, a public information officer. This person would take that role, but there's a lot of fast-moving pieces at times, and we need to have somebody who has the ability to lead a team and direct the communications department. So for me, that's where my mindset is. The job description as is allows me to move forward accordingly, to seek that candidate. So those are my thoughts. Board Member Hightower, I hear exactly what you're saying, and I understand your point on that. So really, I'm fine. However that decision goes.
Your question earlier on, I want to go back to the master's degree, because you said, what is this really? Is it and or? What is it? That kind of is my question, because I see the word or, a related field, or an equivalent combination of, well, does that mean there should be or where all the commas are, to me, for clarity? I mean, I do understand, and I'm not trying to be tacky about it, because I come from that background. I don't want someone to think because I'm a school administrator, I have an upper hand if nobody else applying has school administration. That's the only kind of question I have in that description.
And if I may, when I talked to Dr. Smith, I have confidence that he's going to be looking for the right type of person. The problem is we're creating a job description that may outlast all of us. And so I wanted to make sure that it is actually clear what is it we're looking for in this job description. The board is charged with creating the job descriptions. He hires the people that we create the jobs for. So, I just, because, later on it says 8 years of progressively responsible experience in communication, public relations, journalism, marketing, school administration, or a related field again. So, I told him, I know that he's going to, because I know the people that were in the communications department in Orange County. I know who he's going to be looking for. But I just want to make sure that when we're putting a job description together, it actually is, for clarity, Dr. Edler, says, what are we looking for? And who is it that would have the best shot at the job?
So is there a major change here if we put that in? May I ask Ms. Odom? Yes, I see.
Necessarily a legal issue, but more grammatical. As I read that, I think it's fairly clear. And as I read that, it doesn't even show that you absolutely must have a master's degree. Right. Because you've got that last clause that says, or an equivalent combination of training and experience. So that contemplates that somebody who has, if you want to insist on a master's degree, then you need to specify that. But as I read that clause, it says that you could find somebody who was a public information officer for some county for years and years and years, and they only have a bachelor's degree. I read that last clause as making that person qualified.
And I like Ms. Hightower have that overriding question of, we understand that.
Right.
But do we need to have clarity for the future? Or should we just leave it alone and let the superintendent hire whom he wants to?
I think it's sufficiently clear.
Okay.
And I will say that the catch-all clause at the bottom, the qualifications may vary from the above requirements, gives any board going forward the leeway to say, we have this candidate who is perfect for the job, but they don't have, they have 6 years instead of 8. That last clause gives any board going forward the flexibility to get up with the superintendent and say, yes, we're good with this. Let's go forward with that candidate.
Nice to have a
Fellow board members, do you feel confident and clear that that's superintendent? You good with that?
Yeah. Here's another question. The one piece I do like is having the master's degree mentioned there, but the flexibility, because there may be an extremely qualified person who doesn't, but I think it just shows we're looking for a highly qualified person.
Sure.
So I like that piece. The other, here's a counter kind of question. If school administration was not in, would it preclude an administrator from applying for the position?
You know, the previous marketing job was a professional service, and that was kind of one of the first places where I was going, is, you know, why was it on the administrative salary schedule? Because if it's a professional level, you know, there's a lot more, in my mind, leeway into the type of person you could put there. And, you know, I mean, they would have to understand that they're no longer, I mean, if they came from within our system, I guess there would be some 15, Mr. Leonard could explain that to me, about if somebody were a school administrator and took the job, if it were on the professional scale, what would be the impact?
It would depend on where that current individual resides on their salary schedule right now. If it was someone that was at a higher pay grade and this is a lower pay grade on the professional salary schedule, it could be a lower salary. If it was, so we're either looking at a demotion or a promotion, one way or the other. I know that Mrs. Hightower and I were able to have a good conversation about this, and was also able to talk to the superintendent many times as we went through the different variations of all these different job descriptions. We looked at several different school districts, specifically in Florida, and then where we fell was in one that Dr. Smith has a great deal of experience in. Their communications and public relations and marketing department is where I think, in the conversations I've heard you have, you want ours to end up. This particular position is one that sort of falls right in the middle in that particular county, and a lot of what you see as far as minimum requirements and responsibilities comes from that job description. And they have everything from a videographer all the way to the chief PIO. Executive, I think, is the title that they use there. So that's why you see what you see here today. And I just need you to make certain you give us direction on how you want us to have it for you on Tuesday night.
Well, I just think eventually we have to live with it, but so does the superintendent, and he may be the one living with it longer. So, feelings of liking it as is? Well, I did have one other question. Changing from deputy to superintendent, is there any thoughts of that could cause a holdback in doing something because maybe they couldn't get to the superintendent? Or that's my only question on that.
I would be willing to accept superintendent or designee.
As a report.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. That would
But the
work.
word designee,
Because in that way, if he's out of town and he designates someone to be the liaison with that person, deputy could be with him. So there would be some need to determine who would be that person at any point.
I made certain to bring this sticky with me. Actually, Mrs. Boswell provided it to me. It says the same thing, but it's just not quite as specific. And this is what you're going to see on I won't say every, just about every job description we currently have. It's appropriate supervisor or designee. which is very close to what Mrs. Hightower just suggested. You probably need to play all that out in your own minds and then make your decision.
Mr. Superintendent?
Yeah, I would be fine with superintendent or designee. I think that works. It does give the flexibility for if some reason I'm not available.
School board policy currently stipulates, and I'll make sure Mrs. Odom verifies this, that if something where the superintendent is not available, his designee is already stipulated in board policy that it is the deputy superintendent.
That's good.
Okay.
We'll make that change.
All right.
Thank you.
That doesn't...
So I don't have to make a motion at the board table Tuesday night? You're going to make the change prior?
We would much rather have it corrected today and get an amendment to Mrs. Payne and have it appear correctly for the school board. And
So I'm willing to give up the school administration thing.
okay.
Well,
That compromise, right?
I think with the
It's a compromise. I got the superintendent.
Well, with the conversation, I think that there's a clarity now for all of us that nothing is more important than anything else in that statement. And as Ms. Odom said, the bottom of the listing takes care of all of that. So everybody's in agreement that Mr. Leonard will send a amendment to the deputy, and they say that the report person would be the superintendent or designee.
And one other thing I want to be sure I'm clear on, the report, the person they report to does their evaluation, correct?
Not always.
Not always?
I report to the, no ma'am, not always.
Okay. All right. Okay, and then I had one thing that's not really an agenda item, but for us to consider. I'm just throwing it out there. Mr. Dennis, or y'all may have already come up with something, but if they need this PR person to be in the same building with the superintendent in order to be able to be accessible, do we have a plan for that? I would be willing to figure out whether we need a boardroom. We love it, but if it's the only space available for someone to have as an office, we might have to consider that.
It sure doesn't have a window in it, though, but go ahead. Yeah.
Well, you got to get more money to get a window.
I know.
Again, we really haven't discussed the physical location of the position, but certainly we can be creative at both McDaniel or the Hall Center, depending on where.
I just think if they want to be really accessible to the superintendent, that being in that building makes more sense.
Be in that building.
Ideally, in that building on the 4th floor, yes.
Right.
And may I, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
I would agree with you. I would very much like that person to be.
Right.
Because when things happen quickly, we need to be able to be in communication.
And that person could be there if Channel 3 calls you up and says, I need you to be there, and they can coordinate all that for you, and you'd be right there to do it.
Yes. Thank you for thinking about that. Appreciate it.
Everybody good? All right, thank you for doing the amendment there, Mr. Leonard. And that will be the way it will be on Tuesday night. Okay. Anything else under HR?
If nobody has anything before we get to the personnel planning document, I have something on the personnel planning document.
I don't hear any objections. Go right ahead.
Okay, if you go to page 7 on the personnel planning document, page 7 of however many pages there are, it's under, let me make sure I've got the right place. This is the community involvement coordinator page. And presently, it's showing the project coordinator for the mentor program being held vacant again. And I'm just thinking, I was held vacant last year, but, this year, and we had COVID and we didn't have volunteers going in. But as we move forward, And as we move forward into the new school year, and even I think we've had some conversations about how getting some of our mentors and volunteers back into our schools for the summer, there's going to be a huge demand on that office. So, because there's a lot involved in getting a person into our schools now with all the security, with fingerprinting, badges being made, background checks, all of those things. And I would really like to know if we had some conversations. I know I spoke to Ms. Kotick, and she gave me information, which I can pull up and share, but presently in her database, she has 750 volunteers or mentors that are sitting out there waiting to be re-engaged with us. She has all these amazing numbers. Usually in the month of April, we have this great volunteer luncheon, and we didn't get to have it last year, and we didn't get to have it this year, where we showcase and thank all of the business sponsors that we've had, all the business partnerships, the wonderful volunteers we have. We recognize the schools for all the hours of volunteers that they've had in their building. And so when you say that you're going to hold it vacant again this coming year, if we can't have it for the whole year, can we at least have it so that if there's a need, that can be filled before the year is out? I mean, I just remember people who have been in that position in the past, and the workload that was involved in getting them, getting coordinated with the schools and training the volunteers, and I just think it's a monumental task.
If I may, Mr. Superintendent?
I was going to ask Mr. Leonard could speak.
It's his hour.
Like I told Mrs. Hightower, she told me that my predecessor had said the same thing. In HR, we just process all of this information. And I'm glad you asked the question the way you asked the question, Mrs. Hightower, because you're going to see other departments. HR is an example of one where they deleted a position that had been held vacant for several years. For whatever reason, the HR department has decided that they will not need that position. Other departments have done exactly as Mrs. Kotick has done here and requested to be able to keep the position on the grid, so to speak, or the DPPD, but just hold it vacant. And there is absolutely a way for that position to be filled if appropriate and required. And that is, we would bring the DPPD back to you that month, making that request for whatever department it may be. We wouldn't simply do it. We would bring it back to you for you to have that approval. We know that, or we hope that there will be an increase in volunteering and mentoring. We know that we're getting prepared to do that this summer and have our training programs for those individuals. So there is a way that if superintendent was requested and then made the decision, yes, we would bring that back to you for that particular department. It just couldn't happen immediately. It would come at your approval.
Okay, so
I can also have a follow-up conversation with Ms. Kotick about that and her goals going forward and future aspirations for positions and so forth. So I can absolutely do that.
I also have had a long-term mentor contact me and wants to know, when can I get back in my schools? And so there are people out there, I think, waiting and listening and looking for ways to get back involved with us, and that's good.
Yes.
That's really good. And so, yes, sir, I think the direction you're taking there is, you can lead the charge there and go right ahead. And I don't think that doesn't stop us from changing anything or preventing. It doesn't ever prevent us. Mm-hmm. If you say yes, then we like to follow your direction.
All right. Well, thank you.
Can I give you the numbers that Ms. Kotick sent to me? Because I just think it's important for the public to know.
You want me to say no? Oh, come on,
No,
sure
you're
you
not
can.
going to. I'm going to talk over
I
you.
know, I know.
In the 1920 school year, so remember that we closed schools in March, so
1920?
2019-2020. He needs some chocolate or something. Okay, there were 7,565 district volunteers. There were 254,368 volunteer hours logged. There were 1,295 mentors. There were 38,111 mentor hours logged. I mean, that's an amazing number. And the things that have to be done in that process, as I related, they create a handbook. She has a handbook that's created. They have to sign an affidavit of good moral character. They have to be fingerprinted. They have to be assigned to different locations. I mean, it just goes on. And I just I appreciate your willingness to go and talk with her about this, because on top of the mentors, she also works with our business partnerships, helping connect our schools to businesses for their support and their help. And I know all of these people are ready to get back into our schools the minute they're given the opportunity. So I don't want her to leave us. I want her to.
Great point. I've had many requests for volunteers and mentors and groups of volunteers and mentors. So excited about the future for them to get back to business.
Okay. Anything else under HR?
Wait a minute. I got to get back. I can't remember whether this is a mental coordinator. Okay, that's it.
Operations. Okay. Nothing coming from the board. Everybody can see the items from the superintendent. And we do have internal auditing. We have inventory adjustment reports for 24 of our cost centers. Any questions? Yes, ma'am?
It's not really a question, it's just a comment. Again, thank you. And Mr. Bryant, would you like to come, if the board chair doesn't mind, come forward and just kind of read what's in the executive summary? Because I think it's an important piece of information, as always, to know how wonderfully most of our schools are taking care of their resources. And I also want to comment to those that had to write the letter that tried to explain where items were. They've gotten better at that. It used to be, we're sorry we couldn't find it.
That's what I used to say.
Well, I know they took their example from you, but they have gotten a little better at it, saying, really also, giving compliments to the property people for helping them figure out where they were last. And I was a little shocked at some of them that had a lot of things missing, but.
Well, I think there's lots of comments to be made. One on the letters, the previous superintendent instituted a policy where the level directors will review their letters prior to. That's why you'll see, maybe Ms. Morgan's signature on some of these letters before they come to us. Okay. And so I think there was an effort to make sure that everything that needed to be in the letter is in the letter prior to it coming to us to put on the agenda.
Okay.
And as far as the number of items, a lot of these inventories represent inventories that were done during the COVID period. And so traditionally we schedule all of our inventories during a time that school's in session. And so all of the assets are normally at the school. Unfortunately, we had to go out to schools during the summer with a set of keys and just go room to room. And a lot of that stuff was at the teacher's house because they were doing virtual instruction. And so while some of them look like they have a lot of assets, to give you an example, I think Bailey started
Bailey.
with
Still missing 21.
300 missing assets.
Yeah.
And have worked that list down, and I'm getting word that they are still finding those items. And so eventually we will get there. It was just kind of a trying time. But if you do look at the executive summary, you'll see there's 24 cost centers here, and it's over 10,000 items. It's about $15 million worth of assets, and the actual value of those assets is about $1,800. And so you're always going to have those situations where an overzealous tech or somebody else comes in and does a clean out and doesn't realize that there's a little yellow sticker on the back of that item. And so it gets disposed of. And you're going to have that every single year. But to do that much worth of inventory and only lose about $1,800 worth of stuff is kind of a real testament to how much they do keep track of their things out there. It is important. You've never seen a principal more excited than the 1 year that they have a missing asset, and they've never had missing assets. They're awfully passionate during those times. When especially, the board's the only one that can give permission to write an asset off, and it just kills them to see their school with one missing asset, especially when the missing asset is some sort of desktop from 1989 that's been in a closet somewhere every year. But for whatever reason, they didn't want to throw it away. Or dispose of it. So that asset isn't able to be found, and they have to write a letter, and it just kills them.
I remember when my son was at Pensacola High School, and they found this closet that had all those, what were they, TRS? They were from...
TRS 80s?
Yeah. It was like a closet full of them that somebody had stuck in there and, forgotten.
Those were commonly called trash 80s. All right.
I just wanted to be sure, and I may call you up again Tuesday night if you're going to be here and just have you, because I think it's important to the public to know that we are good stewards of their finances.
Right. And the way that the department has upgraded itself to find the materials and the tagging and everything, face it, that's a lot better than the old way of crawling underneath of something and finding that tag and reading the numbers.
We still do a lot of that.
Well, I'm sure.
It is what it is when you have to find this stuff, but I think what's important for us is the team approach, because theoretically we could go out there and if we didn't find it, we could just say this is your problem. But we try not to do that. We'll do a first pass, and then we'll work with them to do a second pass, and then when we leave, we will actually work with them to say, well, last year it was in this room, and according to the listing, that was Miss Smith's room. And so you might want to give Miss Smith a call. I know she's not at your school anymore, but you never know. And then Miss Smith says, oh yeah, that's in a filing cabinet at the back of my classroom and locked, underneath a bunch of folders. And there it is. So just working with them to get the list down, I think that's really important.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to add to this conversation and thank Mr. Bryant for the work he does. We meet on a regular basis, and he updates me, and I really value that and appreciate that. Of course, he does not only the property, but the internal audits for our checking accounts on campus, and both are extremely, extremely important systems in place. And I think our principals and assistant principals benefit from his support and the work his team does. They work together quite well, and I think it's really important to have those systems in place. So as Board Member Hightower, you said that we take care of our tax dollars and our finances are clean and on point. So just wanted to thank Mr. Bryant for his work.
Thank you, David. I neglected to do this. I did it yesterday. I didn't do it today. But there are no items from the General Counsel. But if you haven't met Mrs. Odom, would you stand? And think that's the lady you've heard, and we're so happy to have her. Thank you very much, ma'am. And she's become very valuable already. And we appreciate that. All right. Is there anyone here who would like to speak, because I forgot this yesterday, to public forum? Nobody has a forum, huh? Okay. Any comments from the board, from the superintendent, before we adjourn?
I have, Ms. Morgan is still here. I don't know how many of you are starting to hear from senior parents. But
only Ms. Morgan, probably.
I am hearing from particular ones. And, part of the issue is maybe our message is not as clear. That if Ms. Morgan could talk to every one of them, I'm sure they would understand, but maybe they're not hearing the same message everywhere. And so I had asked her if she wouldn't mind making a statement about what the actual, because people say, well, y'all made a policy. And I said, no, we did not make a policy. But she has shared with us what their intent is, and I'd like for her to be able, if the superintendent doesn't mind, let her speak to that.
Yes.
So we are continuing our practice, and we tell parents constantly, and it's not just seniors, but right now the majority are seniors because they're excited and ready to be able to experience all those wonderful opportunities. So we're being consistent. We review monthly. It's pretty much monthly with the superintendent and Ms. Payne, what we can do and what we're not going to do at this point to make sure everyone's safe. And we have told schools and parents that right now, based on our current practice, that we're not having large events. So for the end of the year things, you have to look at virtual and all that. But we have said to them, we will review that again, because our hope is that's very soon things will open up, and if they do, and we can make sure folks are safe, then that will happen. So as you hear things, we're trying to be consistent, because what's very difficult, and Martha Hanna is always at the table too with us, and the health department gets calls from Martha Hanna to see where we are. We're trying to be safe, but we're trying to be consistent as well. It's really important, and that's hard to pick and choose. That's where I get beat up, and you can imagine, and so do the principals. So we're trying very hard to send the same message, but we're almost to May, and we said in May we would review again what we're able to do and get that information out. So I know they're anxious, and schools have to plan ahead, so they're very anxious as well, but we're working on that. So that's where we are. And yes, with a lot of events at the end of the year, they're questioning, can we have big events outside?
Right.
And that has not been our practice right now up until this point, because again, and they're all trying to tell me why theirs is the most important. And I understand that, but again, how do we say to one group, your event is important and yours is not? So it's all, in my opinion, or none at that point when we decide it's safe to move forward. And so, and the principals are very involved in this as well. So that's tough. That's a tough position to be in. But we want to celebrate with our students and parents. We don't want to limit any more than we have to, but we want to be safe. And I want to say this, we are at such a good place. We were at such a difficult place prior to spring break with our school-based administrators not being able to do anything other than focus on COVID. I mean, it was pushing them over the edge. And I think everything we put in place to make sure students were safe and to manage things so that we knew what was going on and keeping it low numbers, getting, congregating and all that, it paid off. And we wanted to finish strong. So now we're in that important stretch with academics and testing and all that, we're able to do that without totally getting sidetracked with all the COVID issues. So, I mean, we have some, but it's so much better. And I think that's because of how we planned and prepared all along this year. So those that have been at the table with me, I know Dr. Smith and Ms. Payne probably gets very tired of me saying, okay, we need to talk again. We need to talk again. But that's the communication we have on a regular basis. We don't want to tell parents and students no, But I think we're at a good place, and very soon we will be talking about finishing the year and what we can and cannot do. And of course, the Base Center is, as you mentioned yesterday, that's a big question, and we're getting a lot of questions about that now as well. So we'll be in touch soon and have more information as soon as we have a chance to. We're wrapping up April, and May we will have to have some direction, and it may stay the course or it may not. That we'll have the experts at the table, because I'm certainly not. I can tell you what's happening in the schools, but the experts will bring them all together. So did that answer your question? And
Not really.
I actually got a question now.
I mean, I understand, because you and I have had many conversations. But what I need to be able to do as a board member is all of these parents, and you know which ones I'm talking about, because I've told you who's called me and written me emails. And all senior moms and dads and grandmas and granddads or aunts and uncles are all, this is a very important event. It's my grandchild's senior year. And so many of them missed out on wonderful opportunities last year, but they did them in-house. They did them in their schools, and some of them. So if I were to craft a response, would I simply say, keep checking in. We are still in the process of making determinations. This is where we are today, but it's continually reevaluated. Well, let me just talk about IB convocation, okay? Because that's where I'm getting most of my.
Me too.
Okay. Yeah, and so they're an outside event. My first thing was to move it so it wasn't within the 2 weeks before graduation. I just said, can't you move it? But then the system's still the same, right? You couldn't have the large groups.
That's correct.
Okay, so I was wrong on that. So is that? Are we saying that 2 week before graduation window is still going to be no events, or are we still reevaluating that as well?
We'll reevaluate that as well, absolutely. But that's where we are a couple of weeks ago or 3 or whatever, early April, and with Ms. Hannah at the table, Health Department, Dr. Smith, Ms. Payne, that was where we were. But yes, we will reevaluate that. But here's what happens. You know this. I know all of you know this, especially if you've been in the schools. You can't change things at the last minute. All of this, to make things so wonderful, there's a lot of pre-planning.
Yeah.
So that's why we try to get ahead of this, but then there's going to come a time when this is the way it is, and that's where we are. So, I want to make sure everyone understands the 2 weeks, because, when we were planning, the last thing we want to do is to have students exposed, and we tell parents that they cannot participate in graduation at the Base Center. To me, that would be probably the most difficult thing I've ever had to do in my career, to tell the parents that. So that's why we put that 2 week window in there. We backed it up. Martha Hannah, Dr. Smith, Ms. Payne, all of us talked about, Mr. Marcanio at the table, all of us talked about the 10 days. We went from the 14 to the 10. How can we just cut things off at that point? And that's where it ends. And then we know they're out there and what they're doing, but we didn't cause the exposure. Yeah. We didn't. And therefore, we follow our rules. Okay, at that point, we're not doing all the contact tracing and all that. So that was a safe zone for us. And that way, all students, I will not have to tell a student, and Dr. Smith will not get those calls, and Ms. Payne and you and all the other board members. So I just felt like that was just so important. I can't imagine telling a parent that their child cannot, because they're not COVID positive, they're exposed. That would be worse than positive. Yeah. So in that sense. So that's where we are with that. But then, yes, we're reevaluating all that. It's just that big events we have said, and I know some other board members have talked to me about big events that we've said no to right now that are going on. But again, it's keeping us safe, and I'm 100% convinced it's allowed us to go into testing in a good way where we are with our schools. So that's work. So yes, I appreciate it.
I think, in our society, unfortunately, it's all about me. And so, you know, I just want to make sure that we're all sending the same message, that, you know, we understand that grandma has to buy a ticket if she's coming in. So I always say, but it's live stream. They can watch and be close and see their face. You know, but, you know, I just want to make sure we all understood that there will be a time where we'll decide, yeah, you can have more than 6 tickets, maybe. But, I mean, I don't know what that timeline is, and I think that's what's frustrating, is that unknown. Can I invite grandma to come, or will she not be able to attend? And so is there going to be, and maybe Ms. Hannah is better to answer this, is she foresee that there'll be, or do you anticipate that there is a date that you will make no more changes after a certain date?
As far as it's different events, but as far as the base center, I have talked to Michael Capps all along that if we can open up, we'll open up. But now there's certain, as we're working on this contract, you know, we're working on it now, there's certain things we have to commit to doing to keep people safe.
Yeah.
So there comes a point where we'll have to just say that's it.
Okay.
But I mean, I will push that as far as I can, because I want every parent to celebrate, every grandparent, you know, all the siblings. So if we, but I've been texting Dana while we're in this meeting, saying I need a meeting with Dr. Smith and Ms. Payne, and then we've got to talk about base center. Michael Capps is going to meet with us face to face. That's our next step. We always do that anyway, close to this time. But since we have so much going on, and they've made some changes, and since with the county commission and that all of that, so there's a lot we need to discuss. Once we can finalize some of those things, we'll get that information out. It's just it's so much going on, and it's the timing. But my goal was, first week in May, I'd like to settle things.
Yeah.
That's my goal. But now I can't tell. Martha Hannah is, I mean, I trust her with my life. We've worked together for years, and she works, she's done a great job. Excuse me. And and then meeting with the district level, we'll figure it out. And we know sooner is better. So we just wanted, it's worked well. About once a month, we address it again. That's not necessarily formally, but we talk about it. And then we all need to get back together, we do. And we've done that a couple of times where we just need to, okay, now we need to come back to the table. We've talked about it, but now. So I think May is the end of April, 1st of May. I'm hoping we can. But
Well, I think what precipitated additional conversations, I'm sure, of the board members, was once the county commission made that statement, plus the fact that we got the thing from the governor and the commission, saying no more masks are necessary and all this kind of stuff. And so everybody's going, well, hey, why are you doing this?
And I wish we could get ahead of all that, and we never can. But when talking to Michael, I mean, while all that's going on, the conversation here, he's telling me, now just don't think that means that you're going to have more people there. He said, that depends on how we look at this. And he shared that with me, and you have to consider, is it 75% of our class, or is it 75% capacity there, and all those things. But then he said, so, it is 75% of that facility. Yeah. But it is a movie. He said, because it depends on what Martha Hannah and the health department and some of those folks are going to say about how they're seating, because just because you can open it up, how you do that seating will determine how many folks. So there's so much to this, I can't begin to tell you. And so that's why all those folks at the table, or all those folks have to come to the table. So it's on our list. I mean, he said, yes, we absolutely need to meet and figure it out sooner than later. But he was waiting on direction too from that's a worldwide company.
Yeah.
They have told us up until yesterday it's going to be as last year. That's why we didn't want to promise parents something. The worst thing we could do is we promise parents and they go move forward with that. I mean, we're in such a good place. I know you're tired of probably hearing me say that, but we're in such a good place with all of it. We've been very methodical, consistent, compassionate. We do care. And I'm going to call every one of those parents that have emailed me. It's a list. Yeah. And I'm getting through that list. And I told my message to them was, I know you're frustrated with us and you can be mad at me. I want to do what you're asking me to do. Just give me time. And I don't know if that we will be able to, but if we can, we're going to do it. It is not, we're done. We've just made that decision. It's done. I mean, we have spent so much time on this, and we've done this for the entire year, because at all levels, but especially high school, there's something going on all the time. And I've heard from each of you throughout the year about, well, you didn't do this, or we couldn't do this, or why didn't we do this? And I appreciate that. It's you get weary, as one of my really good administrative friends used to say, I'm really weary, but it's our job. You can ask me. I told parents, call me again next week. I will get information to you if something changes. So
I want you to know how much I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Because it has been weary. And I know that the state of Florida has been in a different place than the rest of the country for most of the year because of people like you and the people in our system. Ms. Hannah, we've worked carefully and closely with our Department of Health, and we've made decisions based on science and on what's out there. And, I just wanted to give it so I can say, go to minute such and such and listen to Ms. Morgan and let her tell you all the pieces. It's not just about you. It's about all of our students being safe and being able to participate in this wonderful opportunity. I mean, if you go to our links page and you look at our COVID report, we are still very low. We're not as low as St. John's, but anyway.
And I want to say thank you for bringing it up, because I think it shows the public taking time within this meeting to talk about this and let them know that we're not just, sometimes they think we just made a decision, we're moving on. That has not been the case here at all. We have, like I said, over and over again, we're coming back to the table, spending time talking about when can we get back to allowing students to do more things, because we know how important it is and we want that. And the principals are advocating for that. They are too. As hard as that's going to be on them, they're advocating. So we're getting there. Where we land, I'm not totally sure. But again, Martha Hannah, I trust her so much. So we'll be working with her.
Yes.
Yeah. With all that stated, I am looking for us to start returning to normalcy as we roll into the summer. So I want to make sure that if it's the health department that stops you, then we need to know about it on this, because, it should roll. And I think what you're telling me is that, like 10 days out from graduation, no events, is that for seniors?
We're not bringing, and that's it.
Because you got sports going on, it'd be almost impossible to track.
At that time, that's really a good time. Most things have shut down.
Have they?
We'll have all of it. That's a great time. Now, if you get past that, you're going to start having things, the camps and all that you talked about yesterday. But no, that's a really good time. I just want to assure the public we are going to have the band camps. We've finished school. I mean, now the time the seniors leave, we're going to do all their awards, everything ahead of time. So we don't anticipate any challenges with that. Nothing has come up, and I don't anticipate, so I'm knocking on wood.
Okay.
Anything else? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, if I can just add, I want to thank Ms. Morgan and Ms. Kabowski and Dr. Thomas, our directors, and our principals and assistant principals. They have worked tirelessly. Martha Hannah and her team. Ms. Hannah's been communicating with the health department, who knows how many times. But these leaders have done an incredible job, and the principalship has been very different this year. And the director position, they have been immersed in COVID. And I think Ms. Morgan said it really well. We're in a good spot, and it's because of the contact tracing and all the steps that have taken place. But the reality of that is, when you have a principal who has a situation and the assistant principal and the principal, they're going to work on contact tracing, they lose, like, half of their day is gone on all the other things. And they have to be instructional leaders as well, but it really speaks to the focus that they've had of safety and the health and well-being of our students comes first and foremost. We need our kids and our staff to be safe, and their health matters. So I just tip my hat to them, because they have been absolutely relentless on working to make sure that has happened, and it's inspiring to see how they've done that. Also, want to tip my hat to our executive team with Mr. Dennis, Mr. St. Cyr, Mr. Marcanio, Mr. Leonard, and our Deputy Superintendent Payne. They've contributed a lot today, and they do it all the time, every day, and I just want to thank them for their leadership and their work. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Nothing else?
Thank you for allowing me to have that time.
Yes, you had your time. I remind everybody, we have an executive session to continue back in that conference room. We will not be there very long, but we need to give some instruction and direction for the next session. So thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.